but I want to tell my testimony not only to show the power of God in my life and how I've gotten to where I am, but really to explain how the call of God works for some people and whatever it is that you're called to. And just, it's really cool how the Lord can take everything that the enemy meant for our harm and turn it around for our good. And so while I'm doing my testimony, hey, Tioni, keep that in mind. Think about the things that you're most ashamed about. Think about the things about your life that you think, what a waste, or this was so, difficult and painful, and you can't imagine how that any good could come from that, or how God could glorify himself through that. And so I feel like, having walked closely with the Lord for nearly 20 years, the longer you walk with the Lord, the more time he has to scrape up all the junk and make something out of it. So I have a long testimony, and I'm just talking for a minute as people are jumping on, because I'm going to start with my childhood. So you guys share this, invite people. I think that there are people on your page that are going to be blessed by this. Oh, Jesus. We worship you, Lord God. We thank you. We invite you into this broadcast. I thank each and every person that is here watching this. I pray God bless you, that you would just be blessed and encouraged, that the power of God would meet you where you are, and that you would come into your authority in a way greater than you ever have before this year, that you would step into your identity and your authority as a believer more than you ever had. I pray that if there is anything holding you back, any chains, any sin consciousness, any addiction, any bondage, I pray that would be broken off each and every person. Listen, this year. Okay, I was born in Tennessee, and my mother was from up north, and she married my dad, and he was going to go to seminary to be a pastor. And so they moved to Chattanooga so he could go to seminary at Tennessee Temple, which is a very conservative Baptist seminary. And so that's what he did. So growing up, the beginning part of my life, my parents were married. They were a godly married couple. I know my mother was a virgin when she got married, never drank or anything like that. I'm not sure if my dad was, but she led him to the Lord in high school. They were high school sweethearts. They got married and moved to Tennessee so that my dad could go to seminary. And so I never remember my parents arguing. I never have any memory of my parents arguing. We went to church 3 times a week. It was a really, and I thank the Lord for this, because when things unraveled, they unraveled hard. And I feel like that stability of these early years really enabled me, that foundation, which I've talked February about being a month of foundations, how important that is. No matter how everything else is, if you have kind of a foundation, it's so valuable no matter what else happens and what else goes on. So first 5-6 years of my life, I went to a Christian kindergarten, Christian first grade, Chattanooga Christian School. And it was when I was 7 years old that things started to unravel. Now, I will have to say, I don't have memories of my dad's being tender with us. He was there, but I don't have, and not that I have a ton of memories from that time of my life anyway, but I don't think that my dad was really emotionally available even though he was home. But we sat at the table, and my mom cooked dinner every night. We sat at the table and ate, we prayed together. And so there was that stability there. Well, I believe when my dad, he either was about to graduate from seminary or he did graduate. I think he was just about to graduate. He was putting in resumes to get a job as a pastor. And I believe what happened is he didn't get hired. He got frustrated. He got impatient. And I am not sure, but it could be that he wasn't called as a pastor, that my mom had a desire to be married to, she wanted to be a pastor's wife, so he could have been not called as a pastor anyway, might not have even been walking in his true purpose. Because my mom said that he struggled in school, and so they had some marital problems, because I think he would like flunk a class and have to retake it. And so anyway, he went, when he didn't get a job right off, and some of this stuff I pieced together hearing from my mom later on in life, he moved to be with his dad in South Carolina, who had a factory, and he was going to learn the business, and then he was supposed to come and get us, and we were supposed to leave and move with him. But I believe when he left my mom at that time, he turned his back on God. And I don't know the timeline. I think at first he was, really saying he was coming back for her, but I think he started to have an affair while he was gone. And we didn't know this, of course. So my mom fasted and prayed. I do remember she did not handle it well. She was really, really got down to like 85 pounds or something, 90 pounds, just not eating. And but he still wasn't saying he was divorcing her. I think he kind of strung her along for a while, and he would come home and visit some. And I am not sure exactly how long that went on, but I do remember I went to a Christian school, so nobody had divorced parents, and I remember telling people in the second grade, I'm going to go live with my dad, and I talk about this point a lot, because it changed everything. Divorce is so common now. Pray if there is a divorce and you've gone through a divorce, pray over your children, pray and break those curses off of them, because it can open all kinds of doors. I didn't know it at the time. I think my dad had an affair with this one woman, and that didn't work out. But he told my mom he wanted a divorce. And so they came and told us together. And that is basically when things started to unravel. So at 7 or 8, he told her that. And I remember my mom let us go spend the night with some neighborhood kids that night. My sister was 3 years older than me. I thought about how much I should tell of this, because some of it's my sister's story, but because it's so central to what happened to me, I am going to say my sister, who was 3 years older than me, was molested by a neighborhood, seriously, all the way molested by a neighborhood man right about that time. And she was like, I guess she might have been 12. So maybe I was 9 by the time he actually divorced, or she might have been 11. I was 8, she was 11. And she stood in the way of him doing that to me, and said that she would tell on him. And I was somewhat involved in that situation, but not majorly. But got a little bit, I think he may have kissed me or something, and my sister stepped in and said, if you do anything with her, I'll tell. I do remember that. And so from that point on with my sister, she became very promiscuous, and because my dad had left, she got raped by a grown man at 11 years old, and so she would take me around in the neighborhood, and so that's when the sexual molestation started for me. There were a couple of instances, including the night that my dad said that he was going to divorce my mom, and my mom let us go spend the night with some neighborhood people she didn't even know, she just was naive. And I was in bed with my sister, who was sleeping with someone who was older, and she was just acting out of having been molested. So she was essentially being molested by older teenagers, and I was in the bed, and just stuff like that happened young, 9, 10, and then at 11, I got molested. I spent the night with a friend, and my friend's older brother, who was 17, molested me. And I remember, and some of you guys have been molested at a young age, especially if there was a missing father or a neglect from a father. And this is something that, psychologically happens. And this is why it's so damaging, especially incest and things. Because sex is supposed to be a loving thing that binds you together with your spouse. So when it happens in molestation, especially if you're young and somebody comes at you like they like you and they molest you or whatever, you can get a bond with that person. And so I remember at 11 years old being molested by a 17-year-old, obsessing over him. I never saw him again after that night. And I just was obsessed with him. And that honestly is when I would say the beginning of my obsessive, really dysfunctional relationship with guys happened. And I remember camping and having this thought while I was camping with my mom and my stepdad at the time. Forgot about this. My mom remarried a man who was schizophrenic. I don't know what bless her heart. She was a nurse, and she was a little codependent. And so she married this man who was a schizophrenic who also was a pothead. And so we were camping, and I remember realizing I had went like 5 minutes without thinking about this guy and being like, wow. And I have so few memories, so I think this is significant to my testimony of some of the dumb decisions that I made. I always, there's something that happens when you get molested when you're young. You have familiar demons. You have spirits, familiar spirits. I'm always shocked when I talk to a woman who's never been molested, because I was molested so much as a teenager by men, grown men, older men, and way older men even. I think when I was 14, there was a 32-year-old who I don't know what, I met him at the mall, and he would molest me. And I don't even know how I met that grown man or how he had the nerve to do that. But when I was 13, I just basically, there was promiscuity as a teenager. But for the most part, especially 11, 12, 13, and 14, it was molestation situations. It was just people recognizing I was a victim and I wouldn't, that they could get by with it. People who really had no business messing with me, much older people. And interestingly, I would think that I liked these guys. So, oh goodness. There was one summer, I think I might have been 14, and I went to visit my dad, and with my sister, might have been 13, because she was like 16 when she had a baby when she was 15, and she might have been 16. And he got us a hotel on the beach at Myrtle Beach, which is like just party city. I don't know what he was thinking. And I remember him having us dress sexy and hang out with him on the beach, like go places with him. And I could tell he wanted people to think like we were together because we looked older or something. It was really, really twisted. And so that trip, I can't even remember. I probably had 3 different older guys sleep with me. One that was way older, and I think my sister had given me a beer or something and told me to go upstairs with this guy who was 17 or something, 18, maybe even older, because it was his house, so he might have been older. And it was just a mess. I mean, I could tell you story after story, and I don't have to get into all that, but so by the time I was 15, I had a deep sexual wound dysfunction, and was promiscuous. And so my stepfather, tell a little bit about that. He was not ever sexually abusive, or really, he actually did physically abuse me twice. He beat me up once, and but I never really held anything against him, because he really did have severe mental illness, and he would go in the hospital every so often. He'd totally lose his mind, like, have set up booby traps in the yard because aliens were after us. I mean, like, I remember driving down the street. My mom would be driving down the street, and we were driving across a bridge, and he just, and then he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought there was a hole in the bridge. So hallucinations. My mom left me at home with him once. I don't know, I was probably 15, and he sat on the edge of my bed with a gun because he was also a hunter, so there was guns in our house, and I was a little bit scared, but he was actually, I think, there to protect me. He thought he was protecting me from the aliens, but it was still just quite traumatic, and my mom was very unhappy in that marriage. It was a very codependent, dysfunctional marriage, and whew. So let's see. I'm trying to think. I gave my mom a heck of a time. And I will say this. At 13 and 14, I was drawn to the occult because I had very vivid dreams, and I had just a draw to supernatural stuff. And it's interesting because when I was a kid, what I wanted to be was a detective. And I would have a little pad and paper, and I would go and spy on people in the neighborhood. You guys remember that book, Harriet the Spy? And so I always was a writer, and I always was very interested in finding out what was behind things, what was going on behind closed doors, which is kind of telling about what my call was. And so I dabbled in the occult from a young age, but I would never say that I was very good at it or really knew what I was doing or took enough time to like memorize everything. More or less, I kind of wanted people to think I knew what I was doing with the tarot cards. I might have memorized a little bit of something, but I did read different occult books through my teenage years, searching for truth, because I was totally, even though I was raised in church, all that stuff happening. And let me back up. When I was 5 years old, I had a salvation experience. My dad, we watched the Jesus movie, and he led me to the Lord, and I remember praying. I have that memory of that at 5. And so I had a salvation experience at 5. Now, I'm not going to argue whether you can lose your salvation or it's, once saved, always saved. But from my experience, I'm not taking any chances. There's enough verses that go both ways. And I had a relationship with the Lord to some degree, and I was so far away from him. But at the same time, he never left me. But I had a lot of people praying for me. Okay, Lord, help me. I got a lot of testimony to go. I've been through some stuff, so I'll probably miss some things. Oh, Jesus. I guess I was about 15 the first time my mom put me in a mental hospital because she couldn't handle me. And I met a guy there, Sean, and he just adored me, wrote me letters all the time. He was mean to me, but it was actually the healthiest teenage relationship I had, but then it ended up being sexual, so it wasn't healthy. But so I was in there, and they were, they tell everybody they have something. So they were saying that I was bipolar, and I don't know what else they labeled me, but I'm pretty sure bipolar was one of them. So then at 15, I started to do drugs probably about 14. I met a guy named Kenneth, and he was like the worst guy in school, the most violent guy. He had guns. I don't know. His mom, he had an apartment underneath his house, and his mom didn't pay any attention to what he did. So he gave me cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, and so that was 14 is when I started doing drugs. And it was mostly like pot and acid, and I think those were the drugs that I did in high school, or at that time. And then when I was 15, I ran away. I had this bright idea. I drove by a strip club, and me and my friend went in, and, we came out, giggling and stuff. There's naked girls in there dancing. Although I don't think Chattanooga at that time was fully nude. But, so that planted an idea. And come to find out later, and this is how family curses worked. My dad had actually, the woman he remarried, he met at a bar, had been a stripper. She wasn't when they met and married, but she had been. And so I am convinced my dad opened me up to that curse. And so at 15, I plotted my runaway. I'm like, I'm going to be making money. And at that age, I don't know what year that was. I was born in 76. So, in the late 80s, or I guess it had been 90 or 91. I didn't have a fake ID or anything. And I went in there at 15 and they hired me. And so I went home, and I remember getting the neighborhood boy. He was about my age to practice. He was like, you look good to me. But so I went down there. I packed my bags. I moved. I went there that night, ran away. And I had a car at 15 because my stepdad was crazy, had schizophrenia, and we lived not where the bus could pick me up for school. So I got a hardship license. So 15, I had a car. I ran away, and I had only told that guy Brian and one other person what I was doing. But apparently the other person, I told somebody who'd called my mom, and I was arrested the first night I ever drank. I mean, not ever drank, ever danced. So the first night that I was there, and I guess every cop in Chattanooga wanted to be a part of that arrest because, they came pouring into the club, and all the girls that were there were really nice and protective, and I do remember that. But I remember I got arrested. My mom said she can't come home, so they took me to juvenile, and juvenile wouldn't keep me. I don't know if there's not a law that you broke. I don't know why they wouldn't keep me, but I am pretty sure that my mom's insurance had actually run out of money with sending me to these mental places. I was so rebellious and such a mess. And so they took me to the state mental hospital. It's called Moccasin Bend in Chattanooga. Look it up. It is not a place that you want to go. So at 15, I went to Moccasin Bend. Now, I might be getting some of this wrong because it all blends together, the timing. I might have went to another hospital for 2 weeks and it ran out, and then they put me there. That might have been what happened. And my mom said she can't come home, so they put me in the state mental hospital, which is where I spent my 16th birthday. And that place has it's like a dungeon. I mean, it is like the movies, the state mental hospital, even for the teenagers. And I was there for a while. My mom still didn't want me to come home, which I don't blame her. So she put me in Teen Challenge. She found a teen challenge that actually took teenagers, because most teen challenges don't. And so I went to Teen Challenge and spent several months there and, studied the word. And I remember even being on my face one night kind of praying, and, I had a lover or two. I had a couple of lovers. There's a boyfriend or something that my mom broke me, didn't want me to come home because of this guy, older guys. But, Jesus, help me to just focus and get this out. I don't have to tell every little detail of it. But the thing is about Teen Challenge, it's interesting because I'm called to open group homes for women. I've got a huge promise from God about that. And so I have some experience in that. And it's just interesting how God works all that stuff out for our good. So I got out of there and went right back to, actually, I went to high school. I was still in school because I was there in the summer. And once school started back, I went to school. And just started, I guess, 11th grade, and found another club. And I actually had an ID of a friend who was 18. And she had dark hair like me. She didn't really look like me. But so I had an ID then. It was called Rolo's in Chattanooga. And they hired me, and I said I was a college student and I could only work from these hours. And then I told my mom I had a restaurant job. So I was in high school working at the strip club and living at home for a season. And so I had a lot of money, and so I guess I ran away again. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if I ran away or my mom just let me move out. But my mom let me move in with my boyfriend when I was 16. I think she was just like, I can't control this girl. And she said, you can live with him, but you can't dance at a strip club. So she found out that I was dancing at the strip club, and she went down there with the cops, and the cops pulled me out. And I remember standing by my car, and I was like, here's my ID. And they're like, miss, and I pretended like I didn't know my mom. So somehow I remember my birth certificate was in my car, and my mom knew that and reached in my car and got the birth certificate. So the cops showed it, ended up, my mom took my car, and a friend of mine was there that night. So I rode back to my boyfriend's house. I wasn't living at home at that time, but she had told me I could live out of the house, but I couldn't strip. And so she took my car, and I went back to my boyfriend's house and ended up working at a different club down the street. And when that owner found out I was working at the club down the street, and it had been months, 6 months or something, he called me and said, I'll give your boyfriend a job working as a DJ if you come back. So, apparently your mom's, not paying attention. So I went back to that club, and I was working there for a while, and then some girls were jealous because I guess the owner had a thing for me or something. And some of the girls at the club called the police. And they only sent one police officer, and he took pictures of me, which my mom said never, ever showed up anywhere. And my mom took that club owner, this is kind of an aside, she took him to court. He got a year in jail. He served 3 months of it, and he burnt that club down to get the insurance money because he had no recourse because he knew how old I was because she had pulled me out of that club before. So he lost his club, which he should have. I was crazy. Okay, so that relationship with that guy didn't work out that I lived with. And he was older. He was like in his 20s, early 20s. So at 17, I moved to Atlanta. Well, for a while, I was like a hippie, and I went around with the Grateful Dead, and I would like stop in a city and dance, and then I would go tour with the Rainbow People, and they're like a group of hippies that live out in the woods, and I'm sorry. So they go from national forest to national forest. You can live in a national forest up to a month at a time. So I traveled around with them some, and that was around 17. And then I moved to Atlanta with a friend of mine who was dancing down there and had a fake ID. And I had my own apartment down there, turned 18, was making really good money and stuff. And then I met Raul, who is my son's father, when I was 18. And he was 31. And I remember my mom saying, honey, this is going to be the biggest heartbreak yet. And I just saw him. He was so handsome. And he just really, really built well. And I was really shallow. And probably recognized, this is an abuser. I think I like him. I think he'll probably be the worst abuse I've ever had. I'm in love. That was just how messed up I was. So we actually lived together as roommates, and he didn't touch me for a while, and I didn't realize it was because he was perverted. And I'm not going to get into too much of any of it really, of the sexual abuse that happened with him, because it's my son's father. And the less he has to hear, not that he knows there was sexual abuse, he knows there was violence. And so he was trying to get me pregnant because in his mind, a baby would save him. And he had other girls gotten pregnant, I think, that had abortions. And he knew I wouldn't do that, or I guess he figured that I wouldn't do that. And so he was actively trying to get me pregnant, and I was just dumb. And I just wasn't thinking anything other than, I'll do whatever you want me to do, because I had just been trained like that. And the abuse got really, really, really bad when I was pregnant. And he almost killed me more than once. And I finally left him for good while I was pregnant. And I would say, out of everything that's ever happened to me in my life, that relationship was the most traumatizing and has been the most difficult to get over, because it was just a continual abuse, sexual abuse and violence. And I didn't stay with him that long. It would have escalated. The pregnancy actually saved me. I got out from under that relationship pretty quick. And then he would follow me and stalk me and stuff. But this is when I got into prostitution, after that sexual abuse, because it just damaged me beyond what I had been damaged before. And so when I got out of that relationship, after I had my son, okay, I lived with my grandmother while the last 2 months of my pregnancy. I got away from him when I was about 7 months pregnant for the last time. Moved in with my grandmother. And then my sister set up a 10 by 10 shed, like you store your stuff in, like your tools. I put the shed behind my sister's trailer in this little town in Tennessee, and I lived there for a winter with a little heater, peed in a cup, like came inside to use the bathroom or get food. But me and Forrest lived there. That is where I lived when I first had him. And then I got on the list for Section 8 housing. So I got Section 8 housing, and I moved into a trailer park in Dunlap down the street from my sister. And that's where I met this guy named Mike, who I believe Forrest was about 8 months old at that time. And so I had been working as an escort in Atlanta at that time. Forrest's dad took me to court for custody, and I got nervous. And honestly, I always was very maternal. And because of the stability of having a godly, loving mother, even though she definitely had issues, especially after my dad left with codependency and stuff like that, but she was a good, godly mother for us. And so I was also that type of mother. I didn't bring things around him to the best of my ability where I was in my life. And I wanted to be with him. And so I rationalized that I could go to Atlanta and work one night and make thousands of dollars and come back. Or I would actually probably work two. I'd work the weekend and come back, and I'd like work one, every couple of 3 weeks or something. And also was, hiring a lawyer to fight for custody and all this stuff. So I met Mike, and he came to Atlanta with me a couple of times and sat in the car on the weekends while I was turning tricks. And that didn't last long. He was like, I remember calling him. I'm like, so you coming with me? And he's like, I know. And I knew if I didn't stop, they'd probably lose this guy, and I really liked him. And he really liked me. So I quit and went back to dancing. Like, that was my big compromise, and he was okay with that. But then I really wanted out altogether of the adult industry, so I went and took a CNA course. And me and him were back and forth together. He was an alcoholic, and so I went and took a CNA course, and it was during that time, you guys might have seen this already, that I stupidly had talked to some people in the break room or whatever, and maybe I had told them that I don't know what all I had told them, but I know the very last day of that CNA class, I was left alone with this lady who's quadriplegic. She had ALS, to bathe her. And they weren't supposed to leave us alone, for starters. And particularly this lady, it was in her chart, don't give new people to her. She, thinks people are taking her medicine. She's paranoid. She's lost all her faculties. Her brain was normal because she's only like in her 30s, but she had lost so much that she was in a panic all the time, feeling, uncomfortable. People were stealing and this, that, and something else. So I found this out later while we were in depositions over the charge that I got. So anyway, I went home from that, didn't think anything of it, but TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, called me up after I had been out of that thing for about a week or something, and they kept wanting me to come down and talk about something that happened while I was there. Well, I didn't know they were accusing me of anything, so I just blew it off. I mean, I was still smoking pot at that time, and they said people are all the time accusing people, you know, to get their family to come get them. But anyway, they kept pressing me, so I went down there without a lawyer. I hadn't done anything, and I didn't know they were accusing me. I went down there without a lawyer, and it was a male and a female cop, had me in an interrogation room without a camera, without a recorder, taking notes, which should totally be illegal, taking notes about what I said. And I realized they were saying something, somebody accused me of something, and he was like, so did you do this, and da-da-da. He was trying to get me to guess what I was being accused of, and I'm like guessing, I don't know. I'm like, and so I was being kind of sarcastic. I'm like, what did I like? But I mean, I ate that lady's brownie when she was done with everything. Like, and he was just getting angrier and angrier. Well, it turns out, I said, what, did somebody say I molested them? And when he said yes, I like busted out crying. And for some reason, I knew who it was. I knew who it was because there was only one other person I had bathed, and she was completely comatose, like 80-year-old woman, and there was somebody in there with me at that time. So through the deposition, through me going down there by myself and them taking notes, and I actually got up because he was like, well, maybe I can tell you're a caring person. You know, maybe you were just trying to help her out. And I was like, you know, I was kind of rough and tumble girl then. I'm like cussing. I'm like, look, you sick. That might be how you would help somebody out, but that's not how, you know, like. And so I got up, tried to leave the room. He tried to stop me, and I pushed him out of the way and left the room. And like a couple weeks later, I was getting arrested for rape, which is like a Class B felony. And I was like, that was a mess. Oh my goodness. So here I am in custody court trying to get my life in order, and then I get arrested for rape. And thankfully I had like, you know, $8,000 laying around, and I hired a lawyer that was like a deposit, and because they were trying to plea bargain me where I would have gotten like 5-6 years for molestation or something, and I had a 3-year-old at the time, or 2, he was due. Long story short, the Lord delivered me from that. I've told this story before, but it was just by his hand. There was a lot of people praying for me. I wasn't at that time. But as the depositions and as we started asking questions like, how did that even happen? After they wheeled her back in after the bath, these 2 jealous, horribly evil CNAs went in there and said, did you know you were just bathed by a bisexual stripper? And like coerced her into feeling like something happened. And when we actually read she couldn't write, she couldn't talk, and they came out with like 2-page report of what was said. And if you read it and have any intelligence, it was obviously written by 2 girls, not her. It was written in third person, and it was awful. It was awful. She was saying that when I washed her down there, I put my finger in her, which is considered rape, but it's like a potty chair. You know, if you've been in a nursing home, the way that they bathe them is like potty chair. So, I mean, I was new and a little bit nervous about it, and I had a glove on my hand, I had a washcloth on my hand, and she's supposed to blink once for yes or twice for no. And so I wiped her, and then I said, you know, do you feel like you're clean enough? And I thought she said no, so I wiped her again. That was like all that had happened, and we were prepared to show the chair and all how that works. But and I don't think for one second that lady felt anything had happened wrong until they went in there and started coercing her. And then at that point, maybe she thought the second time shouldn't have happened, or maybe she had said no. I don't know. But the Lord delivered me from that, thank God, because that would have changed my life and my son's life. I wouldn't have been able to raise him. He would have went to his dad's. Right before our court case, me and my lawyer are coming out. We're totally prepared. We had interviewed people. There were other CNAs who had seen the CNAs go in there and do that, and I believe I would have won the case had it actually been taken to court. But, you know, this went on for like a year of my life. And so we're walking out of the court, or the lawyer's office, and we're walking out on the main street, and the judge, in my case, Judge Bevel, who has since passed away, is me and my lawyer walking, and then the judge is walking right beside us. This is like an hour before we were supposed to meet at court for my future to be decided. And so it was like, what is going on here? And then so my lawyer takes off across the street. He's going to meet me at court. He had to go do something. And so I'm standing on the corner with Judge Bevel. And I believe that the Lord did that because he had a call on my life, and I was not guilty, and I could have otherwise been charged or convicted. Because I think that moment, it was just the hand of God. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and as I was walking across the street, I just locked eyes with him, and I just laughed. It was like, this is so, I don't know, it was just like this laughter came up. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was almost like a joyous, like, just, what is going on here kind of laugh. This is crazy. And he knew at that point that I had not done anything. I know that he did, and he dismissed it when we went to court. And later on, I went back and got my CNA, and I actually was the caregiver to his mother. And I thought that that was kind of cool. This was later after I had become a Christian. Lord, help my baby down there with the daddy. Okay, so me and Mike back and forth. I moved back down to Atlanta when Forrest was about 3, and I lived there for 1 more year, working at a club that was a brothel. And I had already worked at an escort service, but, you know, this was just really, really rough place to work. I mean, you know, it's rough on your body. It's just a horrible place to work, and a hard place to work for a woman. No woman should have to work somewhere like that. But so I was working there, and then I got tired of working around drunk people, and so I went back to an escort service, and that was my job for a good while there. And I remember my mom coming to Atlanta, and she had a Joyce Meyer tape playing, and I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "This is Joyce Meyer." And I remember the tape because I listened to it over and over and over again. And she said, "Do you want it?" And she popped it out, cassette tapes, back in the 90s, early 90s. And so I remember, and at that time, I had done a little bit of line of coke here and there, but for the most part, I hated coke. I hated working at a club where people did coke. I was a narc. If I saw coke was getting sold around, I told the owners, or I didn't work there because I didn't like to work where there was a lot of coke because the girls would give it to the customers, and then they had the upper hand, and I was there to make money. So I really didn't bother with that. I was more of a pot person and did some ecstasy and stuff. But I did have a client who, when I was working for an escort service, who started paying me thousands of dollars to do coke with him. And so that actually really got a hold of me because he would give me the leftovers. And so I would binge on the weekends or every couple of weeks or something like that. And then like, oh no, don't ever want to do it again. And then I would do it again. And that, honestly, there's a part of my testimony I guess I'll tell. I'd never really talked about it before much. My husband knows. Some people know. But, oh, Jesus. So about that time, I met a couple at a bar who I ended up being, and it was a married couple. I ended up being in a relationship with this couple for a short time. This is like the bottom of the pit of hell that I was in. And they had 2 kids, and she was so eager for me to be in a relationship with them. And I later realized it was because he was extremely abusive, and it took, you know, I guess it took some of the heat off of her or something. But it was a short period of time. I did drugs with them, and, you know, I stayed at their house on the weekends, and then he was really into me. Then he was like, let's get rid of her, his wife, the mother of his kids. And I was like, I started getting uncomfortable about the whole thing and realizing I'm in a mess. And I was still working, some on the weekends as an escort. So he kicks her out. And so I'm there with him. And as soon as she left, that's when I saw he was abusive. And he was probably 10 times worse than I would have ever have experienced had I not gotten out from under that. So when I saw what was going on with him, I called her, and I thankfully hadn't gotten rid of my apartment and just moved in with them. I still had my apartment. I called her when he was at work, and I'm like, let's get your kids and get out of here. So we went back to my apartment in Atlanta, because they lived in Alabama. And me and her I wasn't really into girls. I had been with girls and stuff, but when she came to stay with me, we weren't lovers. But anyway, so, and that was on me, really, not her. So then, that was about the time, and then she moved on, and then that was about the time my mom gave me that cassette tape. And I started listening to it. Now, I've always written my dreams down, and I've always interpreted dreams. I had dream journals, like piles of dream journals, even before I became a Christian. And still dabbled in the occult and stuff at that point. Had occult books and things like that. And I listened to that tape high. Actually, the coke was messing with my nose. And I went to the tanning bed one day, and this girl told me about speed. So I started doing speed, which is, I don't think they had meth, but it was an equivalent of meth probably back then. Maybe not as gross, not quite as bad. And so I started to do that some, and it was such a bad drug. But I knew. I woke up to 2 demons choking me, and I remember they were going to go upstairs and get Forrest. He's little. And I remember trying to say the name of Jesus. So here in the midst of all that, once these demons manifested where I could tell that they were there, I wanted to say the name of Jesus. And another thing that happened during that time was the ecstasy. Ecstasy, unlike coke, which is kind of dirty and you're high and you want to take more of it and it's addictive, ecstasy actually feels really good. It really feels good. And I remember not wanting to come down off of it and being like, my life sucks and I can't keep doing this, And so there was, in some ways, having done ecstasy, it made me long for there's got to be something better in life than what I'm living. And maybe even before it quite got that bad, I went home to visit my mom once. And I was staying in my old bedroom. And she had redone my bedroom. And I called out to the Lord. And it was a genuine prayer. And I said, God, is my job keeping me from you? Is it wrong? Is my job wrong? I was so miserable in my job. But I had excuses for it because I hardly had to work. I could be there with my son. And right about that time, something got knocked off the wall on the other side of the room. And so I'm like, I knew God was there or something was there. It was an innocent presence in the room, an angel or something. And I went over and picked up what had fallen off the wall, and it was a plaque. And it had a Bible verse, which is my life verse. Be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for you will know that your work in the Lord is not in vain. I had asked him, is my job wrong? It's in vain. And if you're working for me, it'll never be in vain. And so that was really at the beginning. And then that Joyce Meyer tape that I listened to over and over and over again. And it was The Battle Belongs to the Lord. And it was about Gideon and Gideon's army. And I'd listen, and then I started reading my Bible high, and I was doing it with this other girl I was partying with, but I actually kept going with it, and she's like, I thought this was just something fun we were doing. I'm like, oh, the answers are here. I know they are. Like, all these stories are coming alive to me. The Spirit was just gripping me. I knew all the Bible stories. I was raised in truth. I was saturated with truth when I was like little. but all the stories came alive to me. And so I was really excited about that, and reading. And then I started to call out the Lord. And then I started like preaching to the guys that I was working for. And that made them uncomfortable, of course. And I'm like, oh, Jesus is real. So there's like a transition period where I hadn't all the way crossed over. And this is where my call is. And one of the reasons, and I'll tell you why I'm telling this testimony now, is it really, and I'll just be honest, is to garnish support for my ministry as I step out to help people that were in the position that I was in, because I didn't have that kind of help. And it is so hard to get out of prostitution. It is so hard to get off of drugs. It is so hard to leave abusive relationships. And they need help. And I understand that. And I have worked for 19 years to come to this place in the ministry where God is saying, step out, it's time to build the structure to help these people. And this is from the get-go. When God first started calling me, he said, if you follow me wholeheartedly, you are going to be used in a mighty way to help these women. And it was never like, oh, I want to go preach and teach and prophesy. It was like, I want to help people like me. And so I fought to get out from under all this within my heart. If I can get past this, if God can help me past this, there's nobody he can't help. And so that is what I started fighting for. And I got on my face one night, had just done some speed, had just bought an 8-ball, and I'm telling you, you do speed, you don't come off of it for a while. And I just done something, I got on my face, oh God, you gotta deliver me, And he supernaturally sobered me up that night, and I flushed it down the commode. And I never did it again, except one time. I did some coke one time, years later, which was dumb of me. But, I mean, essentially I was completely and 100% delivered from the speed at that point. And that's when I was like, okay, I gotta stop doing this. And so what am I gonna do? And so God had me move back in with my mom, and I just couldn't, I had like regulars. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I'm not even going to get into the horrors of prostitution. And I mean, horrors. I don't, maybe the Lord will have me tell that story or make a movie about that story, because I understand sex trafficking. I understand the degrading depravity, the danger that these women are in. There was danger and abuse, and I mean severe things happen, and I just put myself in the most foolish situations. And I really feel like the love of God was in me to some degree even then, because I had that salvation experience when I was 5. And so in a way I had a love for people, if that in a way. In a way I did. I had compassion for people even in that, and I think that's what saved me from losing my mind, because I had compassion for the guys. And man, some people told me stuff and that they couldn't tell anybody else, or didn't feel like that for their stories, that were just awful. And so many hurting people out there from sexual abuse. Anyway, I came to the Lord with all of my heart, all of my soul, all of my might. I 100% went in 2000, the year 2000, the beginning of the year, and came and moved with my mom. I took the CNA course, and I worked as a CNA while I went to college for 7 years, and worked and raised my son. I had a very, very, very difficult, slow time coming out from under all of that trauma. I had some bouts with bulimia, which I had early on in my teenage years. When I first got saved, I had just on and off struggles with masturbation for the first 8 years that I walked with the Lord. I would go like a year. I fasted and prayed. I read every book. I studied the Bible. I was in church night and day. Had my son in church. I homeschooled my son. And so I went hard after the Lord. It wasn't like I was being slack, but the trauma was so deep. And this is, I have two teachings out on trauma that I think are very balanced, not just like, because you hear of testimonies of like, the Lord touched me and everything was great. I was delivered and I never looked back, and then, there was no residual effects. And that was not my story. For whatever reason, it was not my story. And I think it's because I was so messed up that in church I had a really hard time finding connections with people that could relate to me at all. And so because of that, I just always as I got healing, I would always find the least of these at a church. The one person that wasn't cool, the one person that was the reject, the one person who had mental illness or who didn't smell good. Like, these are the people I would connect with, honestly, because these were the people that accepted me because I was weird. Number one, I had a prophetic call on my life, and so I was really always very honest, very open. I've just had a gift of openness, and that makes people uncomfortable. And especially when you got the kind of stuff in me that I had during those times, and would just be open with my struggles. Although I don't know that early on I told people that I had come out of prostitution. I can't remember whether I did or didn't. Probably not. Because it took me a while getting healed of my identity before I felt comfortable sharing that. Now, I did with the homeless people I'd minister to and things like that, or the prostitutes. So I had foster kids. For years I had foster kids, and tried to help with them, worked with prostitutes, worked in homeless shelters, would go whatever the church outreach ministry, I was a part of those. Yeah, they're less judgmental. And just struggled as a single mom. I got out of college, and 8.5 years into my salvation, I opened a business. I opened a boutique, and backslid that summer because I never fully got healed in my identity. And there was always a part of me that felt like I was just kind of like outwardly been cleaned, not inwardly. And so because of that, I started to, and I remember what led to it. Be careful what you watch, okay? Hey, David. I started watching romantic comedies, and then I started, like I said, I had struggles with masturbation, and instead of struggling, I kind of just quit struggling so much and ended up within a couple of months in sexual sin for several weeks. The Lord lifted me out of that, delivered me. I went on a 21-day fast, and I never, ever, he delivered me, finally, from lust, and just purified me and helped me to understand who I was. Once he picked me back up after 8.5 years of having been deep in the Word and really saturated in prayer and fasting those years, him forgiving me again after, there was no way I was ever going to hurt him like that again. And I never did. I never kissed anybody. That actually, that's wrong. My stepdad's nephew, at my stepdad's funeral, I had a drink and he kissed me at the car, but it was gross and I actually pushed him off me. But other than that, and my grief, other than that, I didn't kiss anybody again until I was married for 9 years. Oh, Jesus. But the years, the 8.5 years, however long it was between that slip and meeting Dave, there was a deep maturing that went on. And I was there for my son. I helped him chase his dream. I worked as a CNA, and I had a master's level education, and God did not open the door for me to work as a professional for year after year after year after the store. And I really feel like it was discipline. He was disciplining me and purifying me and putting me in a place where I was practicing true religion, which is looking after the widows and the orphans. I was a caregiver, loving one elderly person every single day, every single day, every single day, washing her body, cleaning her poop, feeding her, giving her medicine, or him. And that was my life for years. And I grew, and I wrote, and I prayed, and I grew in intimacy with the Lord, and I grew in understanding who I was in Christ. And really, when I met my husband, that is when the Lord released me into ministry. And I think that had to be in place for my story, for me to be released into that. And so that was 2 years, a little over 2 years ago, that he released me into full-time ministry. And you know, most of you guys know my story with my husband. I've probably been talking for over an hour. It's a long testimony. So I'll stop there. I will say, in the last 2 years, like, so many of my dreams have been coming true. God has been so faithful. He brought me into a marriage. Like, when I first got saved, I wanted a man who was going to rescue me and show me what love was and all that stuff. Well, God grew me to the place where I was full of agape love, and then he brought someone into my life who needed me to show him. I was mature enough that I could handle that, and that was what God's plan was for me. And now we've loved each other and brought even deeper healing to each other. But so that's been wonderful, because Dave had a lot of trauma in his childhood, and that's his story. A lot of sexual abuse and trauma. A lot of trauma. His childhood is worse than mine, probably. And so the Lord brought us together, and he has been so faithful. My husband is so good. He studies the Bible night and day. He is really eager to please me and to serve me, and he's a good dad. And this is, God is so good. I always wanted to go to Italy. We went to Italy on the honeymoon, which was actually kind of a painful honeymoon because Dave was still really wounded and noticing all the other girls, but still we went to Italy. And then, because that honeymoon was kind of messed up for me, God gave me a second honeymoon once Dave was a little more healed, and we went to London, and we went to Paris on our second honeymoon, which was quite a bit better than the first as far as our emotional intimacy and stuff. And God has continued to work in our marriage, work in our lives, and you guys see me working through stuff still, but I've come a long way. I have not arrived, but I have come a long way, and God is good. And I will say, I have not stepped out ahead of God, and I have waited on the Lord and believe that I am in the center of his will with stepping out, opening an office here, and beginning to minister to the people in this community. We've got a office and a suite, and I believe the Lord said that he is going to bring the finances in to rent the entire suite so that we can have prayer meetings there, and we can have a storage place there as I'm ministering to the single moms and stuff, and we're going to grow from there. I'm super excited. And let me announce this. There's been a lot of transition. You guys know I've had 2 miscarriages recently. And, God had me quit doing the morning lives because he's been just really doing a lot of internal stuff, and I've still been doing a lot of teaching and stuff, but I haven't locked into time, and now is the time. Now that we're in the office, I am locking in, and I'm going to be having a Sunday service every Sunday evening, and I'm deciding whether it's 6 or 7, and we're working on the advertisement for that. And it's going to be actual, like, a service where I'm really doing teaching and digging in and teaching. And then on Thursday morning, I'm doing the prophetic prayer and intercession, and it's going to be teaching, but a little more flowy than the Sunday. And I'll continue to get on and do lives randomly, but I'm locking into those 2 times, and I'm believing soon that I'll actually be doing the Sunday service here in the location. I'm not sure when that's going to happen in God's time. But the first service that I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do series of services, like a series, and I'm digging in, and I feel like, God had me he just woke me up in the morning. I had been prophesying and writing prophetic words last year, but he just started waking me up at 7 in the morning. And so I just kept getting on and doing these lives. And, you know, I mean, I study the word and I would study a little bit, but when you're doing it 5 days a week, you can't really get in and plan the lessons, you know, because I got a family too. So I'd study and I would be also writing and answering emails and doing the other things having to do with the ministry. So doing 2 a week, I think they're going to be meaty. They're going to be powerful. There's going to be a lot of glory, a lot of deliverance. And that's something else. When I tried to get pregnant this last time and begin to believe for the Lord to resurrect that baby, it did not happen. But to me, that was the seed where, and it seems strange, like, okay, so you believed for a miracle and it didn't happen, and that increased your faith. Yes, it did. Because I have been used to lay hands on people and seeing them healed. I have administered deliverance from demons a lot. Like, really manifestations of demonic spirits being delivered out of people. And the healing I have seen a few times, and I've prayed for a lot of people and they were not healed. But I will say my faith is getting stronger and God is purifying me, and I'm truly seeing this location here as a place where it's a healing room, a prayer room, and there's going to be a lot of power going out from there in this small, tiny community. I've had dreams about it. And so I'm asking for partnerships. I really need steady, consistent partnerships. If you can do a one-time donation, that's great. I'm not just saying this. I'm serious. Like, I could sit and just have partnerships and just, you know, I've created an organization. It's a legal entity. We're getting 501c3 status, and you know, I'm taking everything that is given to me and sowing. I mean, I haven't even paid myself in the last month because I believe in this so much, and I have sown in to starting this, and will continue to. But the Lord brings increase. The Lord brings increase. He's blessed me financially through this ministry in the last year, and to the point where I was like, there's no way I'm just doing this to, and just, to me, ministry, the whole point and God giving me money to steward is so that I can live, and then also with the increase, you got to flow out to other people. And I mean, I gave a lot out of even ministry increase. I just don't talk about it, and maybe I should talk about it more. But I gave out a lot last year. I mean, some of the people were our partners. You know, somebody's going on a mission trip, I'd help them with that. Other ministries that were doing what I see we need to do, but I hadn't had the structure to do it, so I've sown into those ministries in faith. And I believe that the Lord wants to prosper every one of us, and that there is that you don't have less when you give in. That you don't have less when you give in. Even for me, holding back and paying myself for this month, it's basically just as a seed of faith, saying, I believe in this so much, I'm going to put everything into it to make sure that I've got everything going. And I'm believing that God is going to bring the increase to where I can, you know, have full-time childcare, which is not cheap. Herndon, Virginia is where the office is. I have to have full-time childcare. At least when I say full-time, like 25 hours or something, so that I can go in and work, because I'm trying to do this around a baby. And I just lost my child care provider, which is perfect because God is arranging everything and He's putting the foundation down. Just got the office in order today, finished some of the touches, and I believe He's going to bring a child care provider that speaks English. So pray for me for that, because I need an English-speaking child care provider so that we can have conversations on the phone. And I don't know, I don't know all the details. God can unwind it. I might do 2 or 3 days a week at first, but I'm just saying I'm willing during the ground level to have my increase go to child care so that I can work and get this thing going. I believe in it so, so much. But I also believe that God blesses the work of our hands. And I also believe that, you know, a worker is worth their wages. So God is going to continue to increase. I just know that he is. I know he's told me. I see that place. And I am not at all ashamed to ask for help, because I need help. I need partners, and I know this is good ground. And I have seen time and time and time and time and time again God bring increases we sow. And sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. Like right now I'm doing this faith thing. I'm stepping out before I even see everything going. I believe in this so much. And this is going to, you know, I know that it's in God's time and it's God's way. But I do, if you have it in your heart, or God's put it on your heart, like this is something I want to partner with Emily Rose Lewis Ministries going forward, I'll put a link there. You can do that. One-time donations are great too. And, you know, or you can just come along for the ride. And if, you know, just enjoy whatever the Lord is doing through me. It doesn't cost anything to enjoy it. I'm giving freely. So I love you guys. And, thank you for listening, sharing this so other people might be blessed as well. I'm going to go down there and relieve my husband of child care duty. And if the vlog is still coming out every Thursday at 8 p.m. God told me to do that, and I see why. Because I am seeing some things go on in the body of Christ, and I really want there to be a transparency that you guys are seeing what I'm doing. I want you to see what I'm doing and how it unfolds to encourage your faith too. And whatever it is, you might be a lot farther along, and you know, and your dreams development. But to see somebody else's dream develop, I think that is encouraging to see behind the scenes as God does things. You know, you step out in faith before you see the whole staircase. You take a step. That's what Martin Luther King said. Faith is taking a step before you see the whole staircase. Love you guys. I'm going to start the services March the 3rd, because I want to have a couple of services already prepared, and that's what I'm doing these few weeks. And also finding another child care provider, getting in the office and doing a lot of paperwork and other things that I'm doing behind the scenes. And so I love you, and I'll see you guys. I will do Facebook Live Thursday morning. I'll be on Thursday morning at 7 a.m. But the Sundays are going to start on March the 3rd. I think that's the first Sunday of the month.